There are species on this earth that have existed for billions of years, long before humans.
And now that humans are here, species are going extinct faster than the natural rate, possibly resulting in the 6th mass extinction.
Come with us as we dive into some of the 40,000 species considered threatened or endangered.
We're not experts and we don't claim to be, but we are passionate and will try to deliver reliable research.
My name's Hannah.
And I'm Laila, and we're here to remind you that they're still here.
Hello and good day to all of our listeners, whoever that might be. We are hosting a podcast. This is the first ever episode of They're Still Here. And Hannah, do you want to explain a little bit about what we're doing?
Sure. So the podcast is meant to kind of remind people about species that are facing extinction. There are thousands of species on the endangered species list. Just kind of talk about why that is happening in such large numbers and what we can do to help.
Exactly. That is right. And so we're going to launch off this first episode today, just kind of talking about the Sumatran elephant, which is a type of Asian elephant. And we will be talking about the environmental impacts that agriculture has on this animal and why they're endangered, what can we do to help this animal, and eventually, hopefully, we can learn more and learn together and spread our knowledge.
That's the goal.
So the Sumatran elephant lives in Asia. It's currently critically endangered, which means it's a pretty high priority in terms of preservation. This animal is heavily targeted where it's living. It lives in Indonesia, and specifically it lives in West Sumatra. There's really not a lot of these elephants left, so by the day, I'm sure the range in which these elephants are living is getting smaller and smaller. And West Sumatra so Indonesia is an island. It's kind of above Australia, below Malaysia. And West Sumatra is one of the most western islands. It's on one of the most western islands, one of the larger islands. And so you've got North Sumatra, West Sumatra, and then you've got South Sumatra. And I guess right now the sources that we found say that they live in West Sumatra and Lampung. I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, but that Lampung is southern Indonesia. And elephants, they gestate for 18 to 22 months, which means that an elephant can be pregnant for over a year because elephants are big. They're very big animals. It takes a while to grow one. They're younglings at 3 years old. They sexually mature at 8 to 15 years. It really depends on the sex for these animals. And then an elephant can live up to 70 years, but they are, like I said, they're critically endangered. They're facing a lot of issues, and Hannah will tell you about that in just a second. And I just want to note that there's most likely less than 2,000 Sumatran elephants left on the earth.
Yeah, I just want to point out that long gestation period and how long it takes for them to reproduce is a big factor in how easy it is for them to build back up their population, which for them, not as easy because they have to gestate for so long and then they grow. And so it's a lot harder for them to build back up their population, right?
I think that's also a common issue, although we're not covering it right now, but pandas face that issue. Is even though pandas don't take as long to gestate, they don't mate as frequently as other animals. So it's just hard to keep that population up because if you're not having animals giving birth constantly, like let's say like a mouse or a rabbit, if they're not having like large litters, it's really hard to preserve a species because they're not procreating like they should be. And they certainly don't have the space or atmosphere to do that.
A big reason of why they are as endangered as they are is, like Laila said, they live on an island of Indonesia, which in looking at it in the grand span, it's not a huge plot of land. It's not that big. And so as the population of humans increases, it's much harder for them to coexist with the elephants. And so they've gotten pushed out of their normal habitats, and they've gotten separated and fragmented due to the increase of roads and civilization. Like Laila kind of mentioned, agriculture and all the farming to produce food for the growing population. It leads to deforestation. They live in a heavily forested jungle area is their natural habitat. And so the increase of farms has increased the deforestation. And then another huge issue with just elephants in general is poaching for the ivory of their tusks. It's a really huge issue that has gotten better. Laws around it have gotten a lot stricter and they are monitoring it more, but people are always going to be greedy. They're always going to want to make that extra buck. So that's another big one.
Especially when you have so many elephants dying in these horrible ways. They're going through these issues of poaching, and I guess I should say the less elephants there are, the more rare that ivory becomes. So it's kind of a commodity in that sense. And like how Hannah touched on the farming and the agriculture, Indonesia, they have a knack for palm oil. They sell a lot of palm oil, and that's what's taking away a lot of the forest. Unfortunately, to grow palm oil, you have to grow palm trees and you have to burn the forest to get that. Doing this, they've been deforesting. Not only are they displacing people, but animals as well, especially the elephants are suffering from this. And what manufacturers will do outside of their plantations where they're growing these rice fields, palm oil, coconuts, banana, rubber, wherever they're growing these crops at, I saw that they are poisoning fruit to deter elephants because elephants are massive. So when elephants intrude on your space and your land, they unfortunately might destroy a lot of things. And in their best interest, the producer, whoever's producing these crops, they will poison fruit and in hope of the elephants eating the fruit. And then you have these young elephants that don't know what to look out for, and they eat the fruit and they die. And that's a huge factor in these animals, as well as people are actively trying to keep them off of their farming land, and they're killing them. But there are groups there in Indonesia that are trying to mitigate it as much as possible.
Yeah, there are some groups, and I'll talk a little bit more about those groups in just a second. But another one that I want to mention, just because it's a problem with endangered and threatened species in general, is as the population gets lower, the genetic biodiversity is lower, making it harder for them to reproduce. So basically, they all become part of the same close family, and there's not as much genetic diversity, which in the natural world is very important. It allows them to adapt easier and to survive easier by picking the strongest traits. That's natural selection, all that fun stuff. So the less elephants there are, the lower that becomes, and it's harder for them to build up a strong population. So another thing to talk about is why it's important for them to build back up their population. Of course, we think it's important in general just because we value them as a species, but it's hard to convince everyone, hey, let's save them just because. Unfortunately, a lot of people need other reasons behind it. So some that we found in our research, in Indonesia, the elephants contribute to, with them walking, they create paths in the heavily forested areas for other animals to easily move through, places they usually couldn't, and they keep vegetation down. And a big thing is fertilization and seed dispersal. They're big animals, they eat a lot, and so they do produce a lot. So that's a big factor in, they contribute to just the ecosystem in general. They fertilize the area and they disperse seeds similar to how like a bird would, but that's one of the big things they do, especially in a heavily forested area. It's better for them to be dispersed lower to the ground because they don't always get that from like birds dropping the seeds from above. So I think that's a big thing to point out, why it's so important to have them around is just the benefit to the overall ecosystem, especially on an island what's closed off from other places. They can't get the exposure of other species coming to the area. Once they're gone, they're gone.
And a lot of these elephants are being kept in conservation areas that are often overcrowded. They just have too many elephants. And elephants, like you said, they eat a lot, they poop a lot, they drink a lot. So they take up a lot of space. They're big animals and they need a lot of area to roam. And Indonesia doesn't have that to offer right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, the groups that are in place, they just don't have the funding to be able to do as good a job as I know they would hope they can do. So yeah, the ETCs, or Elephant Conservation Centers, ECCs, the Elephant Conservation Centers in Sumatra, they try their best. They have a lot of the elephants in captivity to try and conserve them from the poaching and such, but they just don't have funding. So a lot of the ways that they earn funding is by using the elephants for riding and for entertainment purposes, which can take a big mental toll on the animals. So even when they are in a conservation area, it's not a good habitat for them either, which is very unfortunate.
I feel like it's kind of a way now paving a way now for us to kind of talk about how we can help these animals and little things that you can do. Like, obviously, no one's going to jump on a flight to Indonesia and spend their life savings on saving these animals. Like, it's just not plausible for everyone to do something like that. But there are ways that you can help the animals. If Hannah, you want to share some?
Yeah, so there's a lot of the place I did a lot of my research was the Sumatran Elephant Project. That's basically their whole thing, is they work on conservation of the Sumatran elephant specifically, and they're one of the places that need more of the funding. So you can look into them. It's just SumatranElephantProject.org. Then there's also WCS Indonesia. They're just they do a lot of conservation for animals in general in Indonesia, but including the Sumatran elephant. So those are two of the places that I found that are working on this currently and that could use donations, any bit of donations. But another thing is there's just not a lot of information or studies done, and that's why there's not a lot of exposure, and it was hard for us to even find a whole lot of information on these animals and the efforts being taken right now. I'm not saying that you should go and do a study. If you can do a study, that'd be great, but I just wanted to point that out and maybe find someone who is wanting to do a study and fund them. I wasn't able to find anyone.
Another thing that people can do it's not as wide-reaching. This is a little more into people's personal lives, but you can evaluate the products you're using and the products you're buying and making sure that you're not supporting businesses that are ruining the land, that are ruining the habitats for these animals. Just take a look at your kitchen or your bathroom. You know, palm oil is used in food, it's used in makeup, it's used in lotion, it's used in, I believe it's used in diesel. So just kind of being a little hyper aware of what you're buying and where you're buying it from. Of course, buying local is best. If you can buy your oils and buy your fruits and vegetables at like a farmer's market or like a farmer's co-op or something like that, instead of buying from big companies that profit off these, I don't want to say poorer countries, but taking advantage of other countries and their land and their animals. That would just be my suggestion, other than what Hannah mentioned, like donating to people that are working directly with the elephants.
So yeah, if anyone else wants to do research and let us know what you find, we'll have our email posted somewhere. And just let us know if you find out anything, or if you want to add anything to the research that we did. We would really appreciate it.
Right, exactly. And we're just doing this as a way to care about animals and as a hobby, you know. So we're not professionals by any means. We're not scientists. We're not biologists. If any information is incorrect or presented strangely, you can let us know at our email too, which it's forestfriendsproduction@gmail.com, and we'll have that written out too. Thank you so much for listening, and let's try to make the world a better place, and let's try to sustain the species that exist.
Mm-hmm. And let's all just remember, they are still here.
They sure are.
All right, thank you.
If you liked this episode, make sure to let us know.
Comments and suggestions can be sent to forestfriendsproduction@gmail.com.
All of the sources used for this episode will be listed in the description.
And thank you for listening to this episode of They're Still Here.